part of the reason we love doing this webinar is because we know a lot of you wake up January 1st, January 2nd and say, okay, I really want to get an MBA. I want to apply this year to start next year. And you're sort of wondering, what can you do now to make yourself the most competitive candidate come the fall or winter? And so, building your brand, a lot of you have sort of the general feeling that there are things you can do to make yourself a better candidate. I talked to a lot of you doing these free consultations. We talk about brand. And so that's sort of how this webinar originated in terms of what can you do now to take advantage of the several months you have before you submit your applications to make yourself a more competitive candidate. And so that's what we're going to review today. All of you are on mute. We're really excited to be doing this, obviously, with Beat the GMAT, a great partner. And, we're excited to talk about some of the things we're working on even beyond the webinar information. So I'm Kofi Kankam. I'm the CEO of Admit Advantage, as well as of our new platform, admit.me. Okay. We'll talk about sort of the executive summary, a little bit sort of on the material, then tips and strategy. So we work with candidates throughout the world. A lot of you I see on the Beat the GMAT discussion boards. I consider you guys my people, and women too. But essentially we help candidates from beginning to end with their application process. It's a very structured process that we offer. It's very customized to the individual, but it's also, we spend a lot of time building your narrative, thinking of your story, thinking of your critical leadership components, and really take you through step-by-step through the process, because schools are so competitive to get into. I mean, most of you want to go to top 30-ish, even top 5-ish schools, some of you only, and it's really tricky to get into these schools. I mean, you're looking at acceptance rates of sub 20%, sub 30% for schools that essentially have 70% of the applicants applying being qualified. We're known to have sort of very selective screening, and we also really value diversity in terms of, obviously, racial diversity is interesting. We want to sort of match ethnicities and races of some of our candidates, but really professional diversity is more important to us. So we've got a variety of people in different industries. You can see them at admitadvantage.com/consultants, and basically we try to match the industries that you're coming from and you're interested in. So we have people in finance and marketing, government, we have technologists, we have entrepreneurs, consultants, so we're pretty excited about that. There are 3 core tenets that literally keep in our office. 1, experience. So we really want people, all of our consultants have gone to top-tier schools, most have gone to top colleges as well, and we've been in this process ourselves. And I think that's really important because we understand sort of the calendar, we understand personally sort of the challenges you have, we understand how to give a really good narrative of your own background, because we've had to do it ourselves for some of us half of our lives, okay? Most of us also served on admissions committees, either as secondary interviewers, alumni interviewers, and people that work directly in admissions full-time. We're known to have a really strong client focus, which we love. It kind of makes the job fun in terms of really being invested in our clients and wanting them to be successful and getting to know them afterwards, becoming friends with them, and going to weddings and birthday parties and kids' birthday parties. All these things have happened, which is it's pretty fun in terms of being one of the founders of the company, being part of that. And then performance. At the end of the day, our people need to get into top-tier schools, and we've been very fortunate to have people that have been accepted to all of these schools and more. Actually, this is a representative list, but it's not a complete list. So we've been really fortunate to have a good process, but also work with really good candidates who are aggressive and competitive and very, very assertive in terms of what they want to achieve. So there are 2 of us that found the company, but by now, I would say pretty much every person in our company is smarter than us, and that was kind of the intention. It's a little bit scary, but it is the intention. Eric and I founded the company. We both worked at Accenture, different cities, DC and New York, respectively. Eric worked at GE Capital. He sold a software company before he got to school, which is somewhat atypical. Went to Brown, undergrad, major in engineering, and did his MBA at Wharton. We graduated with honors. I worked at Nectafilm, which is a voice over IP company. Sold a software company actually after business school, and did my undergraduate degree at Harvard College, grad school education at Harvard, and did an MBA at Wharton, where else just Wharton fell and ran a big student-run conference. More information on the website if you want to check it out. But essentially, we're qualified. We know what we're doing. We've been in this game for a while, and we've hired really good people who have backgrounds from amazing companies and organizations, from Goldman to McKinsey to the UN, to Google, and sort of all these great companies and schools represented. Okay, let's get to the meat of it. So the first thing to really understand is what a brand is. And a brand basically is kind of like a heuristic. It's an identity of an entity, right? And so most of you are used to thinking of brands in terms of institutions, companies, organizations, not so much people, not so much a person. And so that's kind of something new to think of for a lot of you. It's the first time you've ever thought of yourself to a certain extent as a brand, as a product, and it seems somewhat dispassionate and impersonal, but it is something that we believe is a necessity. So it is sort of the identity. It's driven on sort of personality and experience, as well as sort of the perception of you. So there's a difference between your experience and the perception of your experience, right? And so a lot of times candidates get into trouble in terms of applying to schools and not getting accepted to schools where they quote-unquote should be accepted. It's because they haven't done a good job realizing that there is this difference between what they've done, what the actual facts are, and how they present the facts and how the facts are perceived, okay? And it's really important that you keep that in mind as you go through the process. Again, companies and people have brands, and you really should be working your brand early. So I hope that there are people on this call that are not just applying this fall and this winter. I hope there are people applying in the future, because ideally you have years to work on your brand and not a couple of months. But we obviously take people where they are. And if you haven't been working on it for years, that's okay. You can still get into a top-tier school, but it definitely is better if you spend more time. Okay, a couple of examples, right? So Amazon, right? When you say Amazon to people, we've done this, right? People think one-stop shop. They think efficiency. They think cheapest price, right? That may be changing. They think easy. They think pretty good customer service, right? Zappos the same. It's kind of pretty similar. That's kind of the leadership, the characteristics that are associated with Amazon. McDonald's, what do you think? You think you can find McDonald's everywhere. They're prevalent. They're convenient. 60+% of Americans live within 7 or 8 minutes of McDonald's, okay? It's very easy to order. It's consistent place to place, right? You can get a cheeseburger in Beijing is similar to a cheeseburger in New York. It's fast and it's affordable. These are things that McDonald's and Amazon don't need to write about. These are things that people think of when they consider their company. And so what we're saying is when people read your application, they need to be leaving with the taste in their mouth that hopefully is your brand. And that's kind of how I want you to think about it. Admitted Advantage are obviously not as big as these companies, nor have the tenure, but people are kind of getting to know us, hopefully, we believe, in terms of being experienced, insightful, having a strong process, customer service, being very performance focused. Okay, so those are the leadership characteristics that we have in our business plan that we basically think of as being very favorable to us and leading to a favorable outcome in terms of people working with us. That's our brand, okay? And so, I want you to understand that companies and just like people can focus on different things. So we get this question all the time, what should I write about? How should I sort of describe myself? And the thing we always tell people is, well, it depends on what you have in your background. Like, not every successful candidate to Columbia or Chicago or Virginia or Harvard or Georgetown is the same. And so you've got to make some decisions based on your background about kind of what brand characteristics you want to represent. And there will be some overlap, but really it should be personalized and customized to your own background. So the brand, the other way to think about it is sort of the intersection of sort of your career, your personal, your community aspects. Now, the implication of what I'm saying is that all three of these aspects should be included within your application. So your application consists of your essays, your letters of recommendation, your resume, the non-essay data portion that you sort of do online, and your interview, right? So definitely 4 pieces and 5 in some instances if you get an interview, if your school allows you to schedule an interview by request. The brand is sort of the thing that ties all 3 of those together. But you do need to bring in all 3 of those into your application in order to have a really fleshed out brand. Right? You don't want to be perceived as just a person who can run Excel models all night, but someone that people don't want to hang out with, or not a good networker, or not friendly, or don't have something dynamic about your personality or engaging. Okay? let's talk about career first, right? So I think about this in terms of sort of, three components, all right? So your corporate experience, that's very important. So have you had a clear path? Do you have a focus, right? Talking about your industry versus your competency path. So people get confused, but, we've got some people that know everything, let's say, about Major League Baseball, everything about baseball, right? Because they work in Major League Baseball. That's industry competency, that's industry sort of expertise. Then you've got sort of, a competency potentially in finance or in marketing or in operations or in tech, or if you're in the military, potentially leadership or sort of management of deployments, etc. So think about sort of yourself in those two silos. They're not the same. Think about if you have industry and if you have sort of particular competency. Most of you will not have both. Most of you will have one or the other, and most of you will have a competency because most of you have not been in your industry that long and or had a huge amount of responsibility in your jobs, your careers where you've been able to develop that industry expertise. But there will be those of you that have both, or we'll see that have industry. It's important to know where you fall in this, okay? Think about your career transitions, right? So have you been jumping around? That would be okay if you've left your job a couple of times, but has it made sense? Has it been logical? What about the corporations you've been part of? Do they have brands themselves? Have you worked at startups that don't have brands? Or have you worked at bigger companies or even bigger startups like a Lyft or an Uber or an Evernote, companies of that nature? And then obviously there's the leadership training aspect. All these things drive into sort of, contributing to your corporate brand, right? In terms of your responsibilities in your career, that's very important also in terms of driving your brand. So, are you a driver of someone or a contributor professionally? So are you someone that sort of takes orders, or are you someone that runs a project or runs people to get stuff done, and or runs people, I should say, right? So, have you had management experience in leadership roles or sort of more sort of just membership? And then stretch roles. Have you basically been reaching to do jobs and assume responsibilities that are sort of outside of your formal competency, but you've been challenging yourself to do well? These are the things that schools think about. All these components really broken down to the two silos of corporate experience and responsibilities, right? And then excellence. Okay, that's the third piece of your corporate career brand, I should say, right? So have you shown a tangible achievement? So not have you been responsible for things, but have you left a legacy? Have you really contributed to the bottom line where the organization that you're part of says, look, if this person weren't here, we would have been in a lot of trouble. Stuff would not have gotten done, all right? Have you have a history of promotions as well? That's quite important. But obviously that sometimes depends on the industry and or company you're part of. And then time. Have you been able to do this for a long time, or have you been doing it for a short time? Meaning, think of, I'm trying to think, some popular culture. So I'll just pick those of you, I'm sure a lot of you know who Jay-Z is, right? So Jay-Z, whatever you think about his music, Jay-Z has been sort of at the top of that genre for 19 years, right? His first album came out in 1996 versus sort of someone newer, I guess like a Drake, has been around for 5 or 6 years, right? Or a newer superstar. So, that matters a lot, okay? In terms of the personal aspect, that's sort of the second piece, right? The personal aspect of your brand. So your academic background, GMAT, intangibles. So in terms of academics, we get this question a lot. What does your undergraduate institution mean, right? So I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I didn't go to sort of a super well-known academic school like a Michigan or Duke or NYU or Stanford, right? Or Wellesley's sort of Ivy League, pretty much Ivy League type schools. Can I still get in? Yeah, you can, but the brand of your school does matter, meaning that there'll be a little bit more latitude for candidates that have gone to bigger name brand schools. There'll be a little bit more attention paid to them. It might represent a disproportionate amount of a particular class. So I will tell you, and I have mixed feelings about this, but at Wharton, there were about just south of 50 of us that went to Harvard College. My class about 840 people. That's a lot, right? And I've no doubt that not everyone went to those schools, went to Harvard, let's say, had the mean GPA of a 3.6. There probably were people that had less than that, okay? But because they were at Harvard and had kind of this brand, people were given more the benefit of the doubt, as opposed to, the couple of people there from, say, like Ohio State, which is where, I didn't go to went to Harvard, but, I'm from Ohio. I just picked that school randomly, but there were a couple people from Ohio State. I have no doubt they probably had 3.8s, 3.9s. They were just killing it in college, right? But there was less wiggle room for them. They didn't have quite the leeway as someone maybe coming from a more well-known schools. And that's kind of what you find across the board, right? Advanced degrees certainly contribute to your brand as well, especially if you didn't do as well in your undergraduate grades, but you do well in your graduate, PhD or master's in something else, that definitely contributes as well. And then GPA clearly is very important in your major, right? So it is true that people that major in the sciences, that's seen as a little bit more robust than major in English. I mean, if you major in English and you have a 3.1, that's not seen as competitive as you majored in like computer science or physics and a 3.1, okay? Because there's a perception that for most of these schools that, man, you can get C's in physics, you can get D's in physics, as opposed to, if you go to school and you kind of do the work and you're in the humanities, you're kind of going to get a gentleman's B or gentleman's B, right? So you've got to sort of keep that in mind as well. Your GMAT, obviously the score is important. I don't worry so much about the breakdown, although you do typically want to be above 70% on the quant side, which is where most people struggle when they do. IR is not quite as important as it probably will be in the future because it's still relatively new. Your GMAT score is related to your background again. So if you are a finance person or you major in a science or a rigorous finance type field and you have like a 680, you're in a little bit better shape than if you sort of have a 680 major in something different. You work sort of in communications, right? Because your GMAT means more in terms of your brand, your ability to do the work. It means more if you sort of don't have that quantitative demonstration professionally or academically. All right? Personal intangibles matter. The story matters. Now, not everyone's going to have a dramatic story like, they climbed a mountain and saved a baby before they sort of, went to school. Most stuff kind of boring, regular run-of-the-mill stories. Sometimes you look at the school's websites, you feel like everyone's got this amazing story. There was a guy in my class at one who was like an Olympian. I thought, I don't have anything, I was like at the bottom 50th percentile for high school track, and this guy's like one of the top 3 or 4 milers in the world. Most of us have regular stories, but, if you have overcome adversity, personal tragedy, roadblocks, beating odds, etc., you definitely should include that. That should be part of your brand. That matters. That's a talking point. That shows a certain kind of ability to overcome odds. It shows an ability to kind of fight through obstacles that will probably present themselves professionally. No one goes through unscathed professionally to get to the top. So if you haven't experienced doing that ahead of time, personally or academically prior to business school in your life to date, you should certainly mention that, okay? But you've got to mention the relevance. You can't just put it in there. You've got to mention how it's relevant to your peers, or it's relevant to shaping it. And if you have an interesting passion, you certainly should mention that as well, as long as it's sort of not drinking or, things that are sort of considered the underbelly of society. But if you have interesting passions, you should certainly include them. There's a guy in my class, actually a good friend of mine, just made Morton 40 under 40, Ben Rellis, who was interested in comedy. And it's a grave mistake to do so. This is different than just getting a job, okay? This is about, being a vibrant, contributing member of academic and professional community. It's about the school feeling like you're going to enhance the environment for your peers, and so you have to demonstrate as well. When you're looking at a world where 60 to 7% of the people that apply are qualified, and yet 25% or less are getting in, this is kind of where people do get in sometimes. It's also important for scholarship consideration. So there will be fellowships and scholarships that are related to things that you've done, and the school will nominate you. It's done in the community, right? The school will nominate you based on what you've written about. So you've got to keep that in mind. You may not even find out about these things unless you sort of, they feel like you've got some
Kofi?
kind of community, whatever that community is. Could be your undergrad community. Could be, yes.
Hi, hey, this
Yes?
is Jennifer with B2GMAT. I'm sorry to interrupt. It appears that you're maybe losing audio. You're
Can you
kind
hear
of
me?
cutting in and out. I can hear you now. Hello?
Okay. All right. Yeah,
I
can
think
you
it
hear me?
may, yeah, I think it may be the audio connection on your end. Let's see if you can make some adjustments.
Hold on a second. Let me check out my.
Sure. Sorry, everyone. We appreciate your patience as we kind of work through this issue.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, we are able to hear you. You sound a little bit clearer. It appears that some of our attendees may have missed what you said on the last two slides.
Oh, the last two slides. Okay.
Yes, as you were unfortunately kind of cutting in and out.
All right. So starting here.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. This is live television, folks.
That it is.
No problem.
All right.
So let me jump in here. So in terms of, let me start here. So building your brain, career is very important. Okay. So, when you think of your career, you've got to think about your corporate experience, your responsibilities, and really your demonstrated excellence. Those are the three aspects that contribute to your career brand. When you think of your corporate experience, think about whether or not you followed a clear career path. Maybe do you have a focus? That's really important that you consider that. If you've been jumping around a little bit, think more so about the skill sets that you've developed, okay? One of the key things that a lot of candidates sometimes do not think about is their industry versus competency paths, meaning, do they have deep industry knowledge, i.e. like, are they in telecom, are they in sort of sports, versus having a competency like they're industry agnostic, they don't have great industry depth, but they're really good at accounting, they're really good at operations, they're really good at marketing. So make sure when you're sort of writing out your background and thinking about your corporate experience, make sure you're thinking about which box you check. Most of you probably check one or the other. You don't check both. If you check both, that's fantastic. And you definitely should certainly emphasize that, especially if you are doing an industry that's very hot, that you think a lot of your peers might be interested in, right? So whether that's venture capital, people are obviously into technology right now. That's a huge one, entrepreneurship. So just be aware of that. Obviously, you want to adjust resume gaps. That also contributes to your corporate brand and your career brand. If you have huge gaps, you need to address it because you don't want to be seen as someone who wasn't focused, someone who couldn't keep a job, somebody who was not able to perform at a high level for a long period of time. Okay, what do your career transitions look like? Right? Have they been logical? Did you start a company and leave after 3 months? Did you start a company? Did you start working at a company and marketing, all of a sudden switch to consulting, then switch to basically to retail? Like, you're going to have to explain that if you did. And look, I didn't have the best career transitions myself, to be totally candid, but I was aware going in that I had to explain this when I applied to Wharton and Columbia, and I did, okay? Um, make sure that, you think about your corporate brand. I will tell you that if you were coming from a company that is not very well known, you should be aware of the fact that you're going to have to show that you have done more, okay? Which is fine, but don't, like, if you're coming from if you're applying from finance, okay, and you're applying from a sort of a, just to be totally blunt, like a third or fourth tier boutique bank versus your peers that are applying from Goldman or Citi or JP Morgan, et cetera, you're going to have to show that you did more deal flow, more responsibility, more people managed, et cetera. That's how you're going to sort of overcome that issue of having a corporate brand that's not quite as strong. And then leadership training. So a lot of you are pretty young. You're early in your careers, and so you haven't had, necessarily a huge amount of leadership opportunities, so you need to think about leadership training. And if you've been trained, put it on your resume, all right? Responsibilities is very important in terms of your career. So thinking about yourself from a school's perspective, we're thinking of your brand. Are you someone that kind of just was a joiner, or someone that contributed, or are you someone who was driving something? Now, obviously, unless you've started a company and/or work in a family company, you're not going to be the CEO, right? So you're not going to be the ultimate driver, but hopefully you've had projects, you've had things that you've led, management, specific items, key tasks that you've managed. Even if you haven't managed people, maybe you've managed execution of it and like getting people on your team who don't report to you to like do their part to contribute to you executing that specific task. That's very important for you to think of. And then stretch roles. Have you been involved doing roles where that really kind of fall outside your direct line of responsibility, fall outside your training, roles that, were where they kind of thought that they needed someone with maybe an MBA. You don't have one, but did you do that role? If you did that, these are things that you certainly can mention towards strengthening your responsibilities. That's a huge contributor to your career portion of your MBA brand. And then excellence. So this is about results. This is not about just outlining your responsibilities. I had a conversation 2 days ago, and I asked a question to someone of sort of, what had they achieved in their job, in one of their jobs. And the stuff that they gave me read like a job description. I was kind of jotting down, and basically it was bullet points. Like, I managed this, I did this, but it wasn't, it was like a job description, but it wasn't about legacy or impact, right? And that's what you need to focus on. What has been your impact? Brass tacks. What have you done, right? Not what has your team done, not what are your responsibilities, what have you contributed, what would not have happened at your company if you sort of disappeared, okay? And they didn't hire anyone to fill that role. That's what I'm talking about. History of promotions, that falls in line with that, and then time. So there is something to be said about doing this for a sustained period of time for 3-4 years, being like one of the top level people versus just performing when you know that you want to go to business school, right? And then getting promoted. So you need to think about that, especially those of you that are younger. You need to make sure, now is a time when you should be dominating. You should be raising your hand for difficult assignments. You should be trying to manage people. You should be trying to do that as early as possible, not when you wake up and have a nirvana moment that you want to go to school, and then you go on your boss and say, look, I'm applying to business school this year. You gotta, I need some cool stuff to put on. People do that, okay? It sounds silly, but people definitely do that. So just be aware of that, okay? The personal aspect of your brand is important as well. And I consider that comprised of 3 things: your academic background, your GMAT, and your tangibles, right? So we get this question a lot with regard to academic background. How significant is the reputation or the brand of the undergraduate school? And I would say that it helps more than it hurts. I would say that if you're applying from a school that's not well known, or that's not considered a super, a fairly high caliber school, you're going to have less latitude in terms of your GPA than if you come from a school that's well known. And I sort of made mention this before, I guess, when a lot of you were cut off, but there were, in my class of about 840 people at Wharton, there were 50 of us, just under 50 of us from Harvard College. I thought that was a really high number, okay? And, I suspect a lot of the people, not a lot, but I suspect that some of those people from Harvard College did not have the mean 3.6 GPAs, right? But the people that came from Ohio State, there were two of them maybe in my class. Yeah, I'm sure they had 3.7, 3.8. I'm sure they just absolutely killed it because they had to be there. So it will help you more than it hurts you. It is what it is. You can't control it, but you should be aware of it, okay? Advanced degrees certainly help as well. So we get this question a lot in terms of, if I did really well in my grad GPA, but I bombed my undergrad, will it cancel out? It won't cancel out, but a strong graduate degree can certainly help. It can help sort of take the sting out of that, and it can help you craft the narrative of when you're really focused, you can actually do great work, but you just weren't focused for some portion of your undergraduate career. And obviously, I think your GPA that ties into that and your major. So, there is a difference in consideration if you were sort of a humanities major versus being a hardcore science major, right? So if you have a 3.132 and you're an English major, and you're trying to apply to Dartmouth, that's going to be really tricky versus having a 3.132 in comp sci or physics. It's still going to be difficult, but it won't be quite as difficult because there's kind of an understanding that that might be quote unquote harder. There might, sciences, it's like, you can get a more objective grade than maybe something humanities. Right or wrongly so, this is a consideration, perception, okay? Your GMAT. So the score is important. I mean, I can't stress that enough. Yes, people look at outcomes, look at people holistically. Yes, you probably know someone that got into a Harvard or one with like a 610. That doesn't happen that often, okay? Your score is important. It's more important for you to do better on the quantitative than the qualitative. Those of you that are native English speakers, those of you that are not, it's important that you do well on the qualitative as well because they want to make sure that when you're there, you are able to communicate with your peers in a way that benefits them, not just benefits you. Okay, and this just score the importance of the GMAT is somewhat complementary to your background. Meaning, if you're a hardcore science or finance person, then you may not need to have quite as strong as your GMAT being poor. You still have something else to rely on to show you can do the work, as opposed to if you're that guy that majored in history and you have a poor GMAT, and let's say you worked in doing PR communications, it's going to be harder for you to make the argument that you can do the work, especially quote-unquote quantitative schools like a Sloan or a Wharton or a Chicago or a Columbia. Okay, so you need to keep that in mind. Intangibles, it's important, but I will tell you that most of us, as I mentioned before, have boring stories. I had a boring story. Okay, it's not that interesting. There was a guy in my class who was an Olympian who was like the number 3 or 4 ranked miler for like 6 years. I wasn't even the 4th fastest person in my family, literally. So, don't feel like you have to have this for manufacturers, but if you did have overcome adversity, someone should include it, right? People want to see that personal tragedy, roadblocks, beating odds, etc. That shows your ability to focus, your ability to basically exploit every opportunity you get, your ability to stand back up when you've gotten knocked down. These are all things that schools look at and say, not only are these things going to be important for this person on campus, this is going to be important for people when they graduate. And schools are looking at you saying, is this person going to be really successful? And if someone has shown that, the school's going to feel really good about taking a bet on that person, all things considered. Okay? If you have an interesting passion, you certainly should mention it too. It certainly enables you to survive what I am offended by, because I am from Cleveland, but the Cleveland Airport test, right? Where people think, do I want to spend time with this person? Is this candidate, is she going to be interesting to her classmates? If they were stuck in Cleveland Airport overnight, would they kill themselves, right? Or would they enjoy it? So this is a great conversation. So you do want to, if you do have an interesting passion, you want to highlight. I've got a good friend, as I mentioned before, Ben, who just was on the Wharton 40 under 40 sold his company to YouTube and Google. He wrote that he did stand-up comedy, and he ended up corralling a couple of us, including me, to do stand-up comedy with him at school. But he'd done a bunch of stand-up, and that was a really interesting passion. People thought that's really interesting, right? Because it says something about him. It said his ability to communicate under stress, his ability to be creative, his ability to sort of unite people. Those are all great things for business school and professionally. So if you have a passion like that, think about the leadership characteristics coming out of that passion and mention it for that purpose. And then if you have a unique background, that's fairly similar. But for all these things in terms of the intangibles, you've got to indicate why it's relevant. That's your job. It's not enough to say, I grew up in Cambodia and, I speak 4 languages. So what, right? How is that relevant? How does that make sense? How's it going to improve your ability to find a job? Or how's it going to improve your ability to help your classmates or your ability to be more successful than the average person? Community. This piece is often not paid enough attention to, but it really is a clear differentiator a lot of times. So schools want to see that you have a commitment to something or someone other than yourself. Right? Obviously, it's business school, and obviously people are going largely to make more money. I mean, let's be honest, it's not the school of social work, it's the school of education. Although even in that school, people go to make more money. That's a hidden secret. But it can be a huge differentiator. And you can get certain fellowships or scholarship consideration based on service to your community. Your community doesn't necessarily mean your neighborhood. Your community can mean your undergraduate alumni association. It can mean your professional group. It can mean your religious or ethnic group. So have an expanded concept of community, but find a way to service your community, to leverage education or background, help somebody else beyond yourself. Right? And it also gives you a great opportunity to have leadership because those either fairly early in your careers, you're often not giving that opportunity in your job, right? Because you're junior. And so if you do something outside of your job, this is a great chance for you to sort of show that, hey, if I'm given a shot, I can actually lead. And people spend a lot of their times, appropriately, a lot of their time writing certain essays about these kinds of things. And almost, I won't say neglecting, but not focusing as much on the professional acumen. And I think that's okay. And a lot of those times those people get into school. So try to have stories like that. Okay. Depth versus breadth. You want to make an impact, right? So you don't want to do 15 things. Do 3 things deeply as well as the 15 things superficially. Find your passion. Doesn't matter what it is, okay? But don't be someone that just kind of joins and does, does volunteering one season, does one thing, the next season does something else. Pick something and stick with it. That also means, I know there'll be a question about this, if you haven't done anything you're applying this year, try to find something that has a beginning, middle, and end. Try to find something that maybe ties into your professional background right now, okay? I wouldn't sort of start 4 or 5 new things if you're applying in September, October. That's not going to be very beneficial to you, right? Community should also consistently tie to your brand, all right? You need to be consistent with it. So, find something that matches your career interests. I mentioned that we had a guy, it was almost like too good to be true. We had a guy, I think in Portland, that wants to work for FIFA. He's not working for FIFA now, but wanted to work for FIFA. And he was involved starting a soccer league, which is great. FIFA is a governing body for soccer. So they put on the World Cups, et cetera, et cetera. And, it was a volunteer activity. He raised a ton of money. He got teams in his community to play. And he was sort of the commissioner. Now, it was something fun. This is kind of the holy grail, something fun. It helped other people and it tied to his career goals. That's something you want, right? That's the ideal situation if you can do it. Let's talk about a business perspective, sort of this new Coke. And it's funny, I just read yesterday the guy that presided over the new Coke just died, the CEO of Coca-Cola. He was, at the time, he was the CEO. So Coke in '85, right, had an idea that they want to expand their brand. And they introduced a thing called New Coke, right? Sound like a great idea. You're dominating Pepsi, you're winning, you want to make more money. So they came up with this new formula for Coke. Now the problem was they didn't introduce it as a new product, they introduced it as the product. So they basically changed the formula for Coke. People went ballistic, okay? Because Coke, it wasn't just a beverage, right? It's a slice of home, it's Americana, right? Especially people in foreign countries. And so people were very, very unhappy about this. Coke had to come back in June of '85. So 3 years later, okay, they spent all this money branding and releasing this product. 3 months later, rather, they introduced Coke Classic. So Coke Classic was their original formula, right? And they had New Coke and Coke Classic. And so they realized they were killing their brand with this new formula because they thought they had to be new and innovative. And people were saying, no, Coke represents home. It represents comfort. It represents familiarity. It represents, as I mentioned, America. And to a lot of their consumers. And so, they learned that you can't mess with your brand in the sense. And so the lesson is stay true to yourself, right? Okay? Be the best you can be within your passion and competencies. So don't be something you're not. And don't try to reinvent yourself now. You're not Madonna or Lady Gaga. Be yourself. Stay with it. Stay with what you've done that's made you successful, right? Apple turnaround story. So, Apple's getting killed. They were not doing well. They had, let Steve Jobs go. Actually, one guy running it, but that's another story. And, they were trying to build market share. They were trying to compete at the time with like Compaq and IBM and HP, et cetera. And then they realized, you know what, we're not going to win there. We're going to win because people think of us as creating innovative products, right? We're about innovation. We're not about the most horsepower. We're about cool things, making technology sleek. And I say this as I'm speaking to you from my Mac, right? So that's when they came out with the iPad, the iPhone, the iPod, right? They created new consumer product categories, obviously the apps that didn't exist before. And they basically said our competency is innovation and design. We're going to market those things to try to get market share on computers, but frankly, we're going to create new categories. We're going to create things that didn't exist and own those categories, i.e. apps, i.e. When the iPhone first came out, okay? So the MBA brand lesson is you got to think about your competency, okay? If you work in banking and energy, are you energy, i.e. do you have an industry competency? Are you like an energy guy or woman who's not, banker but really knows and loves energy? Or are you the deal person? Are you the person that's like, could be energy, could be consumers, could be, healthcare, it doesn't matter. I'm a deal person. I'm the deal lady. I get deals done, do M&A stuff. So determine your competency. That's, I think these examples are really good, and I bring them up because these are major brands that kind of screwed up, right? And they found a way to kind of right the ship. You can make, they had hundreds of millions of dollars in payroll, still made these quote-unquote bad decisions in hindsight because they weren't thinking about this thing up front. So don't make these mistakes. Don't be so arrogant to think that you don't have to think through this. If Coke and Apple, with their tons of MBAs, made these mistakes and almost got their butts kicked long-term and really hurt their companies. So make sure you're focused on that. All right? I don't want to get too much into this. I do want to answer questions. So what I'll say to this top line is we had a woman we worked with who went to Canadian University, had a good GPA, really good GMAT score, but she had issues in terms of lacking confidence. She had not gotten into an American university in college, so she was kind of forced to go, quote unquote, to a Canadian university. No knock on Canadian. My parents went to Canadian universities, but just FYI. She really wasn't clear on why she wanted to go to business school, and she was coming from an organization, nonprofit, that at the time wasn't sending people to elite business schools, okay? Our strategy points in terms of working on her brand were, delineating her assets and qualifiers for MBA class and what she bring to the table so she could write well. She'd done grants. She'd experienced, volunteered in Latin America. She was very global. She spoke, multiple languages, okay? We spoke about her being a global citizen at a time when people were thinking about MBA programs, training people globally and being, global classrooms, like a global environment for ideas to be exchanged with the best and the brightest from around the world, right? And she'd already done that professionally. Though she hadn't worked at a big company, she'd done that professionally. And then basically we helped her really think about her career options before and after school to really work on her path. And she ended up going to Harvard. She got into Harvard, went to Yale. I graduated from Harvard, I think 3 or 4 years ago. What I'll say about this slide, because I don't want to get into too many details because we have to get to questions in the last little bit of time, what I'll say about this slide is she thought of, with us, all these leadership characteristics at the top, right? Being service-oriented, being innovative, being risk-taking, being resourceful, globally aware, et cetera, et cetera. You can't write out that I'm these things. You have to find stories and experiences and accomplishments which demonstrate these items. And that's what we did. So we picked 3 stories, okay? And these 3 stories: revamping a New York City grant allocation program, creating a mentoring program for a previous employer, which is where I actually met her as being a mentor, a volunteer mentor, and building a village library in Mexico. These 3 things allowed us, these 3 stories that we looked to express throughout her essays, letters of recommendation, the non-essay data portion, her resume, those 4 pillars. These 3 stories allowed us to highlight every one of these 9 characteristics at the top. And that's what you have to do. You've got to find stories, experiences, and accomplishments, tie them into specific leadership characteristics they demonstrate, and then put those throughout the course of your application to really tell your brand. Now, easier said than done, but that's the general strategy. Okay, that's the secret sauce. All right? If you build your brand, you can join one of these brands. Okay? So manage your career. Okay? Find people that are going to support you. Stretch. Take roles that are challenging. Don't be afraid to fail. Right? Have an impact in your job and outside your job in terms of your community, and really pursue excellence. Never, ever be comfortable with mediocrity or be comfortable with excellence in the past. That was yesterday. You're only as good as your next day. If you're going to get into one of these schools, get into one of these brands, that is literally what it's going to take, unless your mother or father wrote a big check. Okay? We've recently launched a new platform, and we would love for you guys to try it. It's in beta form. It's a free tools-based admissions community called AdmitMe. It's free. A lot of you I've talked to a lot of you and said, look, I love admissions consultants. I love what you guys offer, but I can't afford it. I don't know if it makes sense for me. So we heard you and we released this platform. So jump on it. It's got a lot of bugs, and we got to add a lot of stuff to it, more content. But please jump on it. You can meet other applicants. You can meet other students and alumni. And you can manage your application, access it from everywhere. Okay? And it'll help you sort of get ahead. You bring on 5 friends, give you a 25% discount on our services. But try it out. We have a couple thousand people thus far, so we're pretty excited about it. We haven't marketed it all. But we'd love for you to get on it and tell us what you think. I'll be your first friend. There's a screenshot. I don't know what that Google thing's there, but this is kind of, you build like sort of a profile like LinkedIn. You got your target schools, your career mission, desired cities, and you can find other people. You can share with other people. You can get feedback from experts, alumni, and current students on here that will help you navigate your process. So jump on if you can. We have a lot of offerings. I don't want to get into it. Look at our website. But I'll tell you, you've got things from $375 to a couple $1,000. So we try to have something for everyone. And AdmitMe really now enables us to do that, to have something for free. We want to help you guys. I went to school in financial aid all the way through, and I just paid off my loans. But we don't want you not being able to get access to a great education, to a great school, because you can't afford it. So this is kind of our commitment to help you guys to do that. All right, but we do have other offerings if you want to check out admitadvantage.com. Get a 10% discount using 1908. We've got more webinars coming up. Like us on Facebook, our blog, great discounts with Princeton Review. And if you want a free consultation, you can go to flexbroker.com/admitadvantage, or email me at kkankam@admitadvantage, or info@admitadvantage, or call. There are lots of ways to get in touch with us. And with that, I'll leave it there, and let's take some questions. We have time for about 10, 15 minutes of questions, maybe 10 minutes. Okay, question. If you were in the process of setting up a website but will not be able to launch until just after the application deadline, can you, and if yes, in which form, address it in your CV and or story? I probably wouldn't really address it, to be honest with you. So I don't think that's that additive to your background, in the sense of, there's going to be no gain from it, right? So there's no demonstrated usage, there's no demonstrated excellence. I think if you've achieved certain things, like, look, I've started a company, I've raised $250,000, I have users paying for something offline, and I'm going to automate, that's different. But if you have an idea to launch something and you haven't really made any headway in it, you can mention it very much in passing, maybe in the non-essay data portion of your application. I don't think it's anything you should really build around. I don't think it's anything you should waste your coveted real estate of your essays or letters of recommendation on, because there's nothing really to write about. Okay? Question. What advice can I offer to international candidates on branding themselves for U.S. schools? My advice to international candidates is not really any different than what I covered. So what I covered applies to everybody, right? I will say that some cultures don't have as much volunteering, and schools are aware of that. But what I talked about, what is important, the one caveat, the one wrinkle is, you might speak about wanting to leverage what you're learning here to bring it back home and help, and speak about how maybe American style management has not yet penetrated, your home country, and it's something you want to bring. But I don't think anything else that I mentioned here, nothing that I mentioned is specifically narrowed or focused only on American candidates. This really is international. Question 3, this person came in late. Tisk tisk. All right, I came in late and missed some of the presentation. What key steps do I suggest towards building a quality self brand? Well, I mean, top line, I think, finding excellence, pursuing excellence, finding opportunities to get leadership outside of work. I think being very focused on your personal, your professional, and your community aspects, and really making sure that, academically you're strong, so you've sort of crossed off the intellectual aptitude brand. I think that finding a way to, think about sort of specific, unique backgrounds or skill sets that you have that can make you sort of more interesting, and I think help you stand out. And I think thirdly, in terms of the community, find a way to leverage your education to help other people in your community, whether that's religious, whether that's, your neighborhood, your school, your undergraduate alumni club. I think doing those things are sort of key background elements to building a good brand. Okay, question 4. How do I address a sub 3.0 GPA in an MBA application that has great work experience in IT and government backgrounds? Firstly, you need to get a really good GPA. You need to show them that you have intellectual aptitude. It's probably unfair because a test is just a test, but if you have a 2.8 and a 610 GMAT and you're trying to get into Georgetown, Michigan, Harvard, Wharton, Stanford, etc., you're going to have a tough time saying that you can do the work. And so you need to do well on your GMAT. I think you need to write about lessons learned from your undergraduate background, maybe write about reasons why you don't have a great GPA. Maybe it's something more something personal, like you weren't focused, or it could be something like I had to work 40 hours a week. I got very sick. I was distracted for a very personal reason. I think you need to think about that, do on your GMAT, and I think you need to write about lessons learned and things that will make you be a better student in business school. That's how I begin to think about addressing it, but that's a little bit nuanced. Depends on your case, but that's kind of what you should be thinking about holistically. Okay, next question. I'm applying in September. Is it too late to start volunteering? Is online volunteering a good option? Okay, this person must have come in late too because I mentioned this as well. It's not too late to start volunteering, but I try to volunteer in something that's the beginning, middle, and end. I try to volunteer in something that's related to something you're doing right now. But if you can't think of anything like that, it's better to volunteer and do something than to say, well, I'm not going to volunteer and do anything because if I volunteer to do something now, they're going to think I'm just doing it for business school. I mean, you're better off having something on there, okay? Online volunteering, I'm not even sure what that is, but I think volunteering online, reading applications, let's say if you're undergraduate, alma mater, things of that nature, I think that's okay, but I think in person is always better. Next question. Would programs such as MBA Math and Wharton Coursera overcome a low GMAT, 630 to 650? Not really. But somewhat, they'll help, but no more questions? I'm still here. You can't hear me? Oh my goodness. Can you hear me?
Well, Kofi, yeah, we're hearing you now. If you can repeat your answer to that last question, you cut out right at that portion.
Okay, I was saying that you're better off taking a course in at your local university, the best school you can afford in terms of time and money, taking a class in accounting, stats, finance, or economics versus taking, a Coursera program or MBA math. Take a class where you can get a grade, take a class at a reputable university, and take a class at the best school you can afford in terms of time and money. Question. Is it worthwhile to get involved with my desired B school affiliated cultural associations, i.e. the Italian American Association and the like, and does this have a positive effect on my personal brand? Well, so yeah, I mean, I would tweak this a little bit. So I would recommend that you basically attend a conference that's in a field that you're affiliated in or with an affiliated group. So if you're a woman attending a Women in Business conference, I think it's great. If you're African American, attending the African American MBA Association. If you're interested in technology, attending the Technology Association conference. Those conferences are put on by the business school students for current students, alumni, industry professionals, and prospective students. It's a great way for you to go, meet people, see the interaction at the school, gives you something to write about as well that you've been tied into the school. It also gives you potentially an opportunity to meet admissions. So I definitely would do something like that if you can, yes. Question. What would I say to candidates that are older than 30 in 2016? Nothing. I think you still need to be focused on your brand. So, well, that's not totally true. So you still need to be focused on your brand. I think you need to be clear about why you want to pursue the MBA program you're pursuing. So if you're 35, most schools probably have you pegged as a part-time or executive MBA candidate. So you've got to indicate why full-time makes the most sense for you, why it's going to be a good fit for you culturally. I think you've got to indicate, you've got to be sensitive to the fact that schools may be concerned that going to business school is not going to help your career. So you need to make sure that you sort of indicate, no, it actually will help your career. You've done some research and you've sort of done some legwork on finding a job on your own. I think the last thing is be sensitive to the fact that schools want people that are doing well in their careers. They don't want now I'm going to pursue getting an MBA because my career as a lawyer hasn't gone well. So you need to make them feel comfortable that you don't have to go to school. You're doing well to choice, and that you're not stalled out in your career looking for sort of a bailout to keep moving forward, even if you are. Okay. This is an interesting question. Just out of curiosity, it looks to me like some people can get away with exaggeration in their applications. What's my take on this? Well, so I think you're asking two questions. So I think the first question is, does it happen? Yeah, I'm sure it happens. What should people be fearful of? They should be fearful that the recommenders don't back them up in that sense, or that the schools select a candidate for that random background check. So schools have started doing this probably in the last 8 years, 10 years actually, where they tell you, look, a certain percentage, one, you've got to sign and testify that everything on your application is true. Secondly, a certain percentage of the applications will be background checked. And if we find out that you've lied, you're going to have your admits immediately rescinded. And so that scared a lot of people straight, but I still think people probably still do exaggerate. But, I'd be very wary of doing that. And we advise our clients, we do not do that. I would not do that if I were you. We've had clients that have gotten background checked. So I don't know what the percentages of this, what percentage of applicants they check, but I would not lie or exaggerate. That doesn't mean you don't put yourself in the best light. It doesn't mean you don't you minimize your weaknesses. Of course you do those things. But I would not lie about things you've done or places you've worked. Okay? All right, let's wrap up here. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. I don't know what's going on my side, but I hope you enjoyed the webinar. I hope it was helpful to you. Certainly reach out if we can help. Find me on Admit Me. You'll see a beautiful picture of my son on there, but I'll be your first friend. But definitely be in touch. If you want to talk about your background, reach out for a free consultation. Kofi at Admit Advantage or info@admitadvantage.com. And I want to thank Jennifer also from Beat the GMAT for letting us do this. And I hope to see you guys next month and see you guys on the platform. Thanks.